And I'm Melody Ann, the founder and your host today. And I want to talk about Brene Brown with you. You may have read her, maybe you haven't. It doesn't matter. I'm not going to be talking about her content in the sense of, rehashing one of her books. I want to talk about how she is a master storyteller. She is so good at integrating research and data and personal storytelling in a way that her readers and her audience can really resonate emotionally with her and the information. She doesn't just present numbers, she makes them human. So I want to talk about that. So let's talk about how she uses personal stories to frame her research. As we know, she is a qualitative researcher, which means that she doesn't look at thousands and thousands and thousands. She's talking about quality. She does really in-depth interviews. She really gets to know people's stories, but she also uses her own. So using personal stories to frame research is really important, and that's number one. So, for example, in Daring Greatly, she talks about her own experience with vulnerability, explaining how she resisted vulnerability because she considered it, a weakness. And then she finally realized it wasn't, and she embraced vulnerability. And the key to that was courage. Now, this was a finding that she came to realize through her research, but she used a personal story to help the audience connect to it. So once she tells the story, then she talks about her years of research, including all her qualitative studies on vulnerability, just to back up that personal revelation that she had. It works because personal storytelling makes an abstract topic tangible. It sets up your reader to feel empathy, and it'll make them more open to what's coming. And the transition, she's really good at transitioning from story to data or data to story. She's really good at that. So don't be afraid to use personal struggle or breakthrough or client stories. But of course, you're not going to, my client, Gary, just take a bunch of clients and kind of shape a story that will work. Use that as an entry into research and let the reader be emotionally connected before you start throwing facts and findings at them. Next thing she does really well, she turns her research into human truths. Research is great, but the truth is, I and most people do not want to sit down and read 100 studies. So if you are reading 100 studies and you want to turn that into a book that we can handle, we want the human truths, not the raw data. So Brene Brown, back to her, gifts of imperfection. She presents, vulnerability, you need courage, and then self-compassion is an important point. She talks about that all the time. But in Gifts of Imperfection, she presents research showing how people who practice self-compassion have higher levels of resilience and lower levels of anxiety and depression. So what does she do? She shares a personal story about herself struggling with perfectionism, and then she shares that moment of realization when she realized that practicing self-compassion through her own mistakes will help her develop the resilience that she wants and reduce her levels of anxiety and depression. Data is more memorable when it is wrapped in a real life transformation. And the other thing it does is it lets readers see themselves in the struggles of the story that you're telling, whether it's yours or someone else's, which makes them more open to change. And what you really want is to write a book that offers a transformation, that offers change, that has a benefit. So instead of saying research shows X, show someone experiencing the transformation that the research supports, and frame research as a life lesson in real life rather than some academic concept. Statistics. We love statistics, right? We like to throw out those statistics. But instead of just throwing out statistics, make them personal, make them relatable, show them how they fit into my life. So Braving the Wilderness, Brene Brown, she talks about loneliness and social isolation. The stat, 1 in 5 Americans feel lonely on a regular basis. So instead of just saying that and saying, and this is what you can do about it, she talks about a time when she was experiencing loneliness. She felt really disconnected from everyone around her, even when she was surrounded by people. The loneliest place in the world is in a room full of people you feel disconnected with. That was the type of story she told. And it worked really well because we didn't just hear the statistic, we felt the pain, because we've all been there. We've all been somewhere where there are lots of people around, yet we feel so disconnected, lonely, isolated. And loneliness, isolation, or at least loneliness, it's kind of an abstract concept, right? You can be alone but not feel lonely. You can be in a crowded room and feel really lonely. So it's a bit of an abstract concept. It's very difficult sometimes to give, not necessarily this one, but sometimes abstract concepts are really hard to make real and tangible, but stories do that. So when using a statistic, ground it in an experience and show how the data plays out in real life rather than just giving your audience an abstract number or an abstract concept. One thing you can do that's really useful is metaphors and analogies can be used to explain the data. So Power of Vulnerability, which is a TED Talk and a book. And she talks about how vulnerability is linked to creativity, courage, and connection. And this is based on years of her research. But instead of just saying that, she uses a metaphor of standing in an arena, which was originally from Teddy Roosevelt's famous speech. But she uses this metaphor of standing in an arena to illustrate what it truly means to engage with vulnerability. And it works because instead of just a dry stat, she now has given us a battle story, right? And it's made this complex idea easier to grasp and remember because we have this image of the arena. We can even see ourselves standing there. So pair research with a powerful metaphor that will stick in the reader's mind and use a well-known cultural reference to give research extra impact. If they get that, if they understand the cultural reference, they'll be closer to understanding what you are talking about or what you're trying to get across. And then, of course, once more, the human side of data collection. So Brene Brown, Rising Strong, she talks about her research process. She talks about coding thousands of interviews to identify patterns in how people deal with failure. But she doesn't just describe the research. She shares how exhausting and emotionally intense it was to listen to people's struggles and how it changed her. How doing the research changed her. And that showed her readers, her audience, that it was real and it was difficult. It wasn't just data on a screen somewhere or a chart in a book. This was real. And through that, she developed a lot of credibility. We saw that there was work behind that research. So if your book involves research, bring your audience into the process. Absolutely. It's a great idea. Show the effort behind the insights. It'll make the research seem real and it'll add credibility to you. So what can we learn from Brene Brown and her masterful storytelling with data? 1, start with emotion, then introduce the data. Use personal stories to illustrate research findings. Make statistics feel personal and relatable. Use metaphors to simplify complex data and show the human side of research and discovery. Think about that as you're writing your book. And I will see you next time for another video very similar to this one.